I'm happy to answer questions as time permits. Otherwise,
yeah. Questions? Anyone?
Yeah.
If you walk outside to the bathroom there, I just noticed the first.
I didn't see any atheist prayer rooms.
There's a well. The interfaith part there has an entrance for a sisters and a brothers room. Separate.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So I mean, clearly that's a mosque.
Yeah, that's clearly.
There's no way to put it. So I'm just curious, is there an evolutionary explanation for gender separation? So clearly, I mean, that's a symbol, it's very symbolic, right. I mean, we have to separate it, you know, it comes back to ideas of male purity and whatnot. I'm just curious whether there is an evolutionary explanation for institutionalizing this separation of genders and making it incredibly apparent, even so apparent as to actually have it as a state-funded university.
It's a great question, and the answer is almost too obvious in many ways. And I'm not saying it's that obvious, but it's obvious in this sense. Look at what I just talked about in terms of the other primates. You don't see that behavior in those primates at all. But the second thing is, when did it happen in humans? It appears, and I write extensively in the middle part of the book, extensively about the big shift in human sexuality, and it was a gigantic shift in human sexuality, happened with the advent of agriculture. The minute we started farming, women had to be controlled, because progeny have to be owned and controlled. Ownership of the land means ownership of the labor on that land, ownership of the inheritors of that land. Human sexuality dramatically changed. Now, how do we know that? Because you can look at the sexuality of hunter-gatherer societies, everywhere from the Amazon to the Na of China, to the Moso of China and the Na, to the Hadza cultures in Africa. And the human sexuality there is very different. And you can see the female has a lot of power and control over the sexual relationship. In the Hadza culture, a woman may live with a man for 4 or 5 years. When she's tired of him, she takes him out. She finds another man. It looks a lot like the way the female gorilla works, except it's generally exclusive to one man, one woman. You see the Na culture, where there's no word for male, there's no word for husband or wife, there's no word for father in that culture. Now think about that. There's not even a word for husband or wife, not even a word for father, because nobody gives a shit who the father is. The female, when she becomes old enough to have a menstrual cycle, gets her own outdoor entrance to the compound. She lives with her mother and grandmothers for the rest of her life, but she can invite any man she wants into her home, into her room. The only rule is the guy has to be out by morning. He can't stay for breakfast. That's the only rule. She can have as many lovers as she wants. One aspect of pride of Na women is having lots of lovers, and that'll happen the rest of her life. Who is the father of the baby would be a question they could not even conceive of. They don't care who the father of the baby is because the uncles serve as the father. So I'm just giving you some examples here that I write about in the book. If you think in terms of hunter-gatherer societies, there wasn't the kind of thing you're talking about, but there is in agricultural societies. So the evidence is not evolutionary. The evidence is cultural, and it's cultural around agriculture, because it doesn't happen in hunter-gatherer societies to the same degree.
Sorry, what about nomadic societies?
Nomadic societies are a little different because they're kind of halfway between. They're oftentimes herders, and ownership is a big issue there. And that's why we have Islam today, because Islam was a herding society in many cases. So, but yeah, herding is agricultural, just like hoeing a row is agricultural.
So would you say that, well, not mythical, men that have many children by different women, they are spreading their genetic wealth around the place, and they serve as excellent uncles as well. So they don't actually look after those children, but back in their own home, they're a great uncle figure to their sisters' children.
Right.
Yeah. So that would be a fairly normal way for them to put something back in if they're putting into that home financially.
Right.
They're expecting the uncles in the other homes to do the same.
Absolutely. And that we know that culture has been around for a long time because Marco Polo visited them in the 1200s and wrote about them on his travels. So we've got written evidence by a Westerner. Of course, he kind of had a crazy way of looking at it, but But what he described is exactly what we know today in China. Here's another little interesting thing. If you were a primitive scientist in the Amazon right now, and you observe that the peccary female mates with several males before she has her litter of babies, or other animals in that forest, in that rainforest, jungle, you might conclude it takes multiple males to make babies in a single female. That would be a reasonable scientific observation of the natural world. If you ever bred dogs, you know a female dog will mate with several different male dogs. And you have no way, if you don't know anything about DNA, you have no way of knowing who, or even if it requires a single male. Maybe it takes 5 or 6 males. Hence, 46 different cultures in the Amazon. Out of 128 cultures in the Amazon that have been studied, 46 of them believe in something called partible paternity. The concept is it takes 3 or 4 men to make one baby. So the woman literally goes out and mates intentionally with other men to get pregnant. When she gets pregnant, those men are all considered the father, and all are responsible for contributing. It's kind of a reverse of the Na culture. It is important to know who the father is, but you got 4 fathers instead of 1. Julius Caesar writes of a Celtic tribe in England at the time that he was doing his thing, where the woman who has sex, the first man a woman has sex with is the father of all her children forever. If she has 10 sex partners, the first guy she has sex with is the official father. Another way to look at sexuality. Well, if you don't put these constraints from our religion and other things, you could have a wide range of observations that would be reasonably good guesses. Well, nowadays we know genetics. Anybody heard about the idea that many birds are monogamous? Swans are monogamous. Geese are monogamous. Every bird on the planet is monogamous. You keep hearing all this. Well, when they finally got the genetics, they found out it ain't true. Yes, swans mate for life, but they're not monogamous. 20% of all the eggs in that nest were fathered by somebody else. In other words, she was out fooling around. And that's what happens. If there's a great book, it's the 3rd best book written on sex, as far as I'm concerned. It's called The Myth of Monogamy. And the 2nd best book ever written on sex is called Sex at Dawn. And I'll let you guess what the 1st best book ever written on sex is. But Sex at Dawn is a great book. Myth of Monogamy, David Brash, actually both authors of those books endorsed my book, so we're all kind of on the same page. But the Myth of Monogamy books showed the genetics of these so-called monogamous species. There's almost not a monogamous species on this planet. Gibbons may be the only monogamous, one of the few monogamous primate species, and part of that's because they're separated by miles and miles. It's hard to find a mate, so once you do, you stick with them. And they may be monogamous, but they're monogamous not out of necessity, not because of opportunity. Other questions? Yeah.
With asexual reproduction, there's very little genetic diversity.
Right.
But if there's a parasite, it wipes out the whole population.
Yeah, right.
You mentioned STIs. Is in polygynous and polyandrous creatures, is there a lot of STIs? And is that one of the things? It's like a cost of having sexual reproduction.
Well, you're speaking as someone who lives in modern culture. If you look back at the history of our species, there weren't that many STIs, and if you mate only within a very limited number of people in your tribe, how do you get STIs? Unless a white man comes along, a French trader introduces gonorrhea, it's not going to happen. I mean, those illnesses, those diseases didn't even exist in large parts of the world. They have actually, where did we get STIs? Where did gonorrhea come from? It probably came from sheep. Why do we get gonorrhea from sheep? Because we're herding sheep. We become agriculture. The agriculture movement created many of the sexually transmitted diseases that we experience today. Not all of them. AIDS obviously didn't come from that probably. But a number of diseases come right from the animals that we were housing in our corrals outside of our own homes. And if you read Jared Diamond's great book, Guns, Germs, and Steel, he makes a pretty good argument for that. Have you read that book? Yeah, he makes a pretty good argument for that. So all I'm saying is STIs are a product of agriculturalism. but it's not our essential sexuality. We have ways of protecting ourselves. We have ways of curing ourselves. So why should we kowtow to the religious? The religious are trying to tell people in Africa, you got a sexually transmitted infection because you disobeyed God. No, you got one because you listened to the Pope and he said not to use a condom. And in my book, The God Virus, I show how biological viruses actually work in conjunction with religions to inculcate entire populations into a given religion. I mean, if you're a Hawaiian, when the missionaries first hit the islands of Hawaii, and the missionaries say, put your clothes on or God's going to strike you dead, I mean, they're having sex all over the place. There was almost no taboos in Hawaii around sexuality. There were lots of taboos around food. Religious foods taboos were very strong. You get your head chopped off for eating the wrong thing in Hawaii. But who you fucked did not matter, unless it was the king or queen. No, they were a little more temperamental about that. But so the missionaries come. They introduce, what do they introduce? It's the smallpox and a couple other diseases. And 3 weeks later, everybody's dying. Well, yeah, you're going to put your clothes on because they said you're going to die if you don't put your clothes on. Now you put your clothes on because God's making all these people die. Well, the missionaries just take advantage. They knew darn good and well what was going on. They'd seen smallpox before, but the natives of Hawaii had not. It's two different viruses, the God virus and the smallpox virus, working together. And you see it all over the world. You saw it in South America with the conquistadors going in. If you look at the Maori in New Zealand, they're more Presbyterian, they're more Mormon than Mormons and Presbyterians are. Those people who are conquered oftentimes adopt the religion of their conquerors more vociferously. In the United States, blacks are far more religious than whites are. If you look in Central America, the Native Americans in Central America are far more Catholic than the Spanish who conquered them. So we see this all over the world. Whoever is conquered adopts the religion of that person, of that conquering tribe, of that ruling group.
Like Stockholm Syndrome.
It is the Stockholm Syndrome writ large. I think you're exactly right. Writ large. Hold on, I want to make sure people have not had an opportunity to ask a question. I saw another hand. Okay, you're the last one. What's our time frame? We need to...
We've got a few minutes.
Okay, a few more minutes.
I was
Okay.
just interested if there's any interesting correlations between death anxiety and sexual deviance, or I suppose shame.
What is your name?
Alex.
Alex. That is a brilliant question. And I've really never seen many people write about it. Freud wrote a little bit about it. But I think those two are very, very closely tied. In fact, I have a whole chapter on sex and death. Imagine this. You are told from the day you're born that you're going to hell if you don't obey God. Then when you become sexually mature and you masturbate for the first time, you're told you're going to go to hell if you masturbate. It doesn't take long to join death neurosis with sex. And that's what I call it, death neurosis. What is a neurosis? It's unnatural fear of something you don't really need to be that afraid of. Now, I'm afraid of death, and everybody in this room is probably afraid of death. There's nothing wrong with being afraid of death. But there is a lot wrong with being afraid of death when you join it with your sexuality. If you have sex in the wrong way, you're going to die. If you have sex in the wrong way, you're going to be eternally tormented or punished. Yes, there's a strong correlation between sexual anxiety, sexual neurosis, and religiosity. Now, I think you were also asking, are there things like religion and death and fetishes?
Oh, no,
things like that?
I mean, there are. I mean, obviously, the death anxiety has been correlated with religiosity.
Absolutely,
that's a fact. But
yeah.
I'm just thinking specifically with sex.
But not
like
with
shame.
sexuality.
Yeah,
Nobody's
with
talked
sexuality,
about
so,
that part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So research doesn't exist.
I couldn't find any. And that just tells us the religion's got the power to blind us to the obvious. I mean, it's obvious religion's very interested in death and very interested in sex. Why? Nobody's asked that question as far as I can tell. Yeah.
I've read that the bonobos are closer genetically to us humans than, for instance, the Indian elephant is to the African elephant.
Yeah, yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because, like, apparently our two closest relatives are the bonobos and the chimps.
Right. Uh-huh.
And yeah, that's just one I wanted to clear up, because that's quite amazing when you think of it, just how close we are genetically to these creatures if we don't often think of it that way.
Yeah, but you also have to understand genetics don't just work so cut and dried. There's actually components of the gorillas that we're more closely related to than chimps or bonobos. Because your genome is not all evolving at the same speed. So there's components that we inherited from whatever the line that were conserved in us from the gorilla line that were not conserved in the bonobos and the chimps. And there's some recent information about that. But about 30%, yeah, we're very closely related to all three of those groups. And we're not as closely related to gorillas as we are to chimps and bonobos. But there's a component of our genetics that's actually more closely related to gorillas than those two. It's kind of confusing, but once you understand how genetics really work, not all your genome's evolving in lockstep. And anybody read The Selfish Genome? All right. Well, it's all explained to some degree in Dawkins' book, The Selfish Genome. By the way, how many of you saw his recent documentary, Death, Sex, and the Meaning of Life?
Yeah.
Starring Darrel. That was fun. Dawkins secretly flew into Kansas City, and his producer said, "Don't tell anybody he's in Kansas City," because he didn't want any reporters. And we sat down and had breakfast that morning, and he interviewed me for a couple hours, and I got 2 minutes in this documentary. But we had a lot of fun. It was really fun. I mean, how many times do you get to spend 2 hours just talking, like friends with Richard Dawkins? It's quite an interesting experience. I'll probably never have that opportunity again. Good questions, folks. I really appreciate it. Anything else? And if not, we'll... Do you have a question? Yeah.
I read that there's a statistical correlation between increased intelligence and having fewer sex partners, and I was wondering how that's in.
Yeah, I think there is. In fact, and I think it's somewhat explainable. I mean, I don't get turned on by people who are a lot less intelligent than I am. And if you just look at the bell curve, there's also evidence that in order to be an atheist, you have to have an IQ of about 110 or higher. You don't meet a whole lot of atheists that are less than 110. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't be, it's just not as common, especially in Kansas. So imagine if you just look at the bell curve, and we're out here, or whichever way you want to look at it, the high IQs are way out here, and there's a pretty small number of us, so it's harder to find mates within that smaller pool of people. I mean, if you've got 120 IQ, then you're in the top 1% of the entire population of intelligence. So, maybe you'll go down to 95% to find a mate, but you're not going down to 60%. You've got to stay up at the top. So, people are going to find, and if you look at the IQs of mates, people who mate for long periods of time, they almost always have an IQ that's within 5 points of each other. Almost always. My first wife and I, we were both going to graduate school together. We both took IQ tests at the same time when I was getting my doctorate in psychology. We were within 3 points of each other. And I would dare say that most of my lovers and partners throughout my life were always pretty close to where I was. Because I just don't get turned on by dumb people. I'm sorry, it's just... Don't put that in the video. A boss of mine years ago, he had an IQ of like 145, far higher than mine. And I was in his office one day. I was complaining about some of the problems that we were having with some employees. I was the chief psychologist. And of course, he looks at me and says, "Darrel, do you realize how dumb a 100 IQ is?" Oh, I guess I hadn't thought about that. But it really is. I mean, half the people in the world are below 100 IQ. It's hard for us to find. I mean, if you're up here in the top 5%, it's hard for you to find a mate. No surprise, is it, statistically? All right, I have really incriminated myself way too much here, haven't I?
Recorded.
So,
in your data searching, you had some Australian data in that, you said?
I did, yeah. If
And
you are
was there
interested,
anything
thanks
of
for
interest
asking.
in that?
Thanks for
Yes.
asking. This is, we'll sell this to you for $8 tonight, but you don't need to buy it. I'm not trying to sell this to you. You can get online at ipcpress.com and download our survey. We did this last year what 14,560 atheists told us about their sex lives. Nobody has ever asked an atheist about their sex life. Well, not this many of them. And we did a survey. Our survey was 69 questions long. That was an accident, by the way. It really was. It was an accident. And if you, my assistant called me up late Sunday night. We were getting ready to release it Monday, and we started off with like 120 questions, and we combined some and reduced some and changed them. And by the time you're finished, you've totally lost track of how many questions you really got. She called me up and said, "Darrel, do you realize we have 69 questions in our survey?" No, I didn't, but it sounds about right. So we went with it. But this is a fascinating study. It's got all sorts of graphs, all sorts of stuff. Nobody's ever asked atheists, what happened to your sex life after you left religion? About 80% of our sample used to be religious, and now they're not. So we just want to know, what happens? How many? We found that 28% of atheists are kinky. That doesn't surprise you guys. Kind of surprised us. Fetishes. We ask if you got a fetish. What's your fetish? I learned new words. I have never. I thought I knew a lot about fetishes. I didn't know diddly squat. But we did have for Australia. There were 387 people completed our survey. 2.7% of our entire survey was from Australia. 80% was from the United States. Pardon?
Was it all
How many of those
heterosexual?
One at a time.
How many of them were kinky?
Were they heterosexual or homosexual?
Oh, that's not all broken down in here. We could break it down. We didn't. It's already 48 pages long. If we broke it down that much, but in Australia, I have no idea because we didn't break it down there. We can tell you how many were heterosexual, bisexual. We can tell you all that story in our general, but we didn't break it down to by country. We just didn't have enough. 2.7% is not enough to worry about. Well, I'd like to worry about it. If you guys want to take it, we could go do it again here in Australia. But I don't think the results would change a lot. What we found was when you leave religion, you lose your guilt, your sex life increases dramatically. But we did find out some interesting stuff. Guess what the most sexually guilt-ridden religion is?
Catholic.
I'm just taking guesses. Catholic?
Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist?
Coptic.
Coptic?
Coptic.
Coptic? Well, Coptic didn't appear in ours because it's mostly North American, but yeah. Nope. Number one most guilty religion in our survey was Mormonism.
Oh.
Sexually guilty. And right behind them were the Pentecostals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and Seventh-day Adventists. They were the most guilty. Now, just a little bit farther down were the Catholics. But the Catholics couldn't hold a candle to those Mormons. They are screwed up. It's really bad.
But isn't it true that Utah's got one of the highest downloads of pornography in America?
Utah consistently sets the records for pornographic downloads and has since we've been keeping track since about 1999. Now here's the other thing. If you look by zip code in the United States anyway, Utah always tops out. But if you look by zip code, you'll find that the most religious zip codes have the highest pornographic downloads. 6 out of 7 days. Now it's down on Sunday, but it more than catches up the rest of the other. There was another great book called A Billion Wicked Thoughts. It came out a couple years ago. Have you seen that book? It's a great book, great read. But they took and looked at all the internet searches based upon some paid sites and stuff. They found all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, for example, there's this one site that is dedicated to deeply Christian women. The site is just for Christian women. And what they found was the IP addresses for the deeply Christian women, 47% of those women searched porn sites too. Isn't that interesting? Now, they don't know anybody's name or anything, but they can tell, half of those women are also looking at porn. It's just thing after thing. Religion drives you to do crazy things about your own sexuality because you can't be who you are. And that's why you see things like pedophilia among priests. The most unnatural thing you can ask a human being to do is not have sex. That is fucking crazy. I can't imagine anything crazier than telling a human being that every single cell in your body is sexual and yet you can't express that. Or a nun, the same thing. No doubt that drives really bad behavior, inappropriate behavior, illegal behavior, harmful behavior to other people and children.
How do monks do it? How do Buddhist monks? Because I mean they're sexually repressed as the Catholic priests. How do they?
You haven't read of the scandals in the Buddhist monk temples of boys being raped?
Clearly.
It's Buddhist monks. The whole Buddhist monk system is as bad as the Catholic priest system. Boys go into Buddhist, usually get put into a monastery at age 7, and they're committed as a priest from age 7. That's crazy. And so it's no surprise there's been dozens of temples now scandalized in Thailand over those boys being raped by Buddhist monks. And it doesn't make the Western news, but if you go do a Google search, you'll find it.
That's totally new to me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, just go Google it. Buddhists are this idea that Buddhists have got some edge on the West in this religious sexuality it's propaganda from the Dalai Lama, among other people. So the only Buddhists that are worth looking at are California Buddhists. Are they really Buddhists? That's what my question is. That's half joking. Yes, in the back.
Do you think the Catholic Church will ever wake up to the fact that it's their rules, their arbitrarily imposed rules in the 13th century, I believe, are a cause of all this pedophilia, and they might actually arbitrarily change that rule back to allow their priests to have normal sexual lives? And the corollary to that question would be, do you think we'll ever pass legislation to stop people creating environments where pedophilia is fostered naturally as a result of the repression they've caused?
Well, first of all, you'd have to prove it beyond 20 shadows of a doubt, I think, because the Catholic Church isn't going to change. I don't see that at all. But my point in the book is I'm not sure it even matters then. It's religion that drives this stuff. That's why you get Ted Haggard, who's gay as the day is long in Colorado Springs, screwing a male prostitute in Denver and getting caught while doing methamphetamines. So you see Baptists, you can Google this one, StopBaptistPredators.org. StopBaptistPredators.org. It's a whole website devoted to exposing all the Baptist ministers in the United States who are raping children, raping women, inappropriately, doing illegal stuff as predators. It doesn't make the news like the Catholic Church, but it's probably just as bad. So don't let the Catholic Church thing throw you off. It's religion, and it's not just celibacy that's causing this problem. When I was growing up, and I write about this, when I was growing up, 8 different ministers got caught. In my little town of Wichita, Kansas, not that big, we only had about 6 or 7 churches of our particular little denomination. 8 different ministers got caught screwing the wrong person. One person got caught 3 times before they finally fired him. Why? Because he was the most popular minister, had the biggest church, was bringing the most money in. You don't fire a good money-making minister, until he screwed 3 women he shouldn't be screwing. Now here's the deal. None of those were illegal. It was not illegal for him to have sex with any of those 3 women. It was immoral, according to his religion, but it wasn't illegal. That doesn't make the newspapers. That doesn't make the news. Nobody gets sued over that. So just consider, broaden this out. Get away from just the Catholic stuff. Bad as it is, there's a lot more going on there too. I mean, you saw the guy the other day, where was this? Of course in the United States. He had convinced all these women that his penis emitted milk. And so after the service, he would take the women back and give them some milk. I could get into that kind of religion myself.
It was in Brazil.
Oh, it was in Brazil. I'm sorry. I give U.S. credit for too much there. It was in Brazil. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, that is just really weird, isn't it? But there's nothing illegal except it was against his church's religion. But you can't arrest a guy for talking to some women and giving blowjobs. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, you have a question, I think.
Yeah, unfortunately it's changing the tone. But at the moment it seems to me that the Western world is pedophilia mad, and particularly around religious pedophilia. In Australia they're looking into institutions as well. Is there any evidence yet that this is starting to shape the foundations of the believers anyway? Because
seems to me that hurting children is fundamentally understood by people to be evil.
I agree. Well, first thing to comment, you guys had a rather large scandal here in Australia with a Catholic school principal and chaplain just a few years ago, and they established that they had raped hundreds of boys, mainly, over a period of decades before they finally caught these guys. Somebody was turning the other way, and we see the same thing in Ireland. The police were not taking those things seriously. So it's not just the churches that are doing this; it's the entire culture ignoring. If you look at a policeman in Ireland, or probably a policeman here who's called into a Catholic school to investigate, they're in awe of this institution, and the institution can throw them off track really easy. So that's an institutional issue that I don't think a lot of people realize. The other question, your other concern was, are they being discouraged? Well, in the United States, I don't have figures for anywhere else right now. Thanks for coming, guys. For every new Catholic member in the United States, they have lost 4. Yeah, that's current too. The only growth area in the United States for the Catholic Church is Latino immigrants, Catholic immigrants coming into the United States. The Catholic Church would be decimated without illegal immigrants, basically, in the United States. But you see it in Ireland right now. It was only about 20 years ago, 80% of the people in Ireland were in Mass at least once a week. Now it's down to like 20%. In Ireland, used to export priests, like you guys export kangaroos. So, and there was back then there was, I think I read roughly 2.5 priests for every parish in Ireland 20 or 30 years ago. And what they do when they molested a child, they'd send them to Boston. That's usually where they ended up, was Boston, and then they'd spread out. Pedophiles would leave. So they got rid of their pedophile problem by shipping them out of Ireland. Of course, they didn't really get rid of it. Now what do they have? They have 1 priest for every 3 parishes in Ireland. And guess what? They're importing them from Nigeria. They cannot produce enough priests in Ireland. Who ever thought Ireland couldn't produce enough priests? I mean, they were producing priests for the entire planet for several centuries, and now they can't produce enough for their own. So I think the answer is we're seeing a sea change in a lot of places. And I think even in some areas of the United States, I'm surprised. The kind of groups like this, 5 years ago, we couldn't have done this in almost anywhere in the United States. And now I speak regularly to groups that are far larger than this. In Los Angeles, in Kansas, Wichita, I'm going to be at a convention in Wichita. They'll have 300 people that didn't exist 2 years ago. 300 people coming to, not just hear me, but to hear a lot of other speakers. So I think we're seeing something happen, and I'm loving it. It's fun, isn't it? It's fun to be on the cutting edge of something like this. Yes?
How long do you think it will take until the first atheist will be elected president in Vienna?
Well, I'm going to tell you, this woman, Judy, my friend who traveled with me, she's been saying Obama's an atheist since the day he announced he was running. I don't know if he's an atheist.
Openly.
Yeah, I think Michelle's keeping him under wraps there. I don't know. I don't care. As long as they're tolerant of the rest of us. And I think the fact that he mentioned in his first inaugural address, and those who don't believe, that there was an enormous cheer came out of our community, and that was 4 years ago. But we have a lobbying organization now in the United States that is starting to flex its muscle, the Secular Coalition, and it's a coalition of about a dozen big organizations within the atheist movement. I think we're going to see some change. Our goal is to see 20 congresspersons out as atheists by 2020. Currently there are none. But we do know at least, I think the figure was somewhere in the mid-30s. We know there are at least 35 or so atheist congressmen right now. But they can't say it out loud.
Out of how many?
435. Yeah.
You mentioned Nigeria. What's happening in Africa with regard to Catholic Church, and the whole sort of continent seems to be kind of in a religious flux?
It is. Wherever you've got a lack of education and disease, it's an opportunity for any religion to come in. So you see 3 religions growing rapidly. Islam is growing rapidly in Africa. Catholicism is growing rapidly in Africa. And Pentecostalism is growing rapidly in Africa. It's also growing rapidly in Brazil, in South America. Pentecostalism is a real crazy religion that's growing really rapidly in places you would never expect. Mexico is just blossoming with Pentecostals all over the places. But it's that lack of education. I mean, you can easily infect people with God viruses if they don't know any better. So they've got techniques, we can shame you. We can tell you got this disease because you didn't obey God, and suddenly you're going to have to get converted because we have a hospital over here. If you come get treated, we're going to make sure you get a treatment of a different kind too, as the religious treatment when you come through. It's not coincidental that almost every hospital on the planet, until fairly recently, was associated with a religion. Because the best time to infect somebody with a religion is when their rational immune system is down. I mean, you get a cold, you get the flu most easily when you're under stress. Well, the same thing is true of religion. It's really easy to catch religion when you're sick, physically or mentally. I mean, that's just makes common sense. How many of you know somebody who got Jesus at 35 years of age? Yeah, so they woke up and they got Jesus one day. It happens a lot in the United States. I mean, I know an engineer, a guy who's really bright, and he and I enjoyed each other, had a lot of fun until his father died of a long, drawn-out, year-long battle with cancer, and he got Jesus. Now, the the interesting thing about that was he didn't wake up and say, Allah is the answer. He woke up and said, Jesus is the answer. That's because he was raised by his grandmother and parents in a pretty religious family until he was about 6 or 7 years old. You get the religion, the disease, that you're exposed to early on, just like you get measles, and later become shingles. So it stays in the body. You'll finally suddenly get a revelation. You're now a Catholic or a Pentecostal. Well, I'm sensing we ought to wrap this up, and we ought to get some beer.
Did you want to mention the books in the past?
Oh yeah, if you want to buy a book, just come down here, and the $16. Actually.